Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and we have something a little bit interesting today. We're going to kind of go about this video a little different than your standard traditional review, because what I'm basically going to do is kind of show this figure off to you guys along with the figure in question here. Well, actually, this is the figure in question, but the one that I think it may have potentially come from. And I think we're going to try to together decipher if this is a bootleg or not, because it is very clearly a weird-looking Spinosaurus figure that I had found on AliExpress. So, of course, if it's something from AliExpress and it doesn't really have any type of a brand name, or it's like Onyx or something like that, it's kind of questionable at times. But this one specifically has a striking resemblance to the Nanmu Spinosaurus. And I think you can straight away see the Nanmu Spinosaurus in this figure just from the pose and everything, but there's also a lot different about it. You can very clearly see the head sculpt is very different than what you see with the Nanmu version, but you also can see this thing has quills, which makes it an even stranger looking version of a Spinosaurus. And you can also see that I haven't taken it out of the plastic or anything quite yet, but it's a very interesting looking version of the Spino. And I'm honestly, at first when I acquired this, I received it, I was like, oh, that has got to be a bootleg of the Nanmu Spinosaurus. The pose is just so similar, it's gotta be. So I didn't actually review it or anything. I've actually had this here for probably about a month now, and I just kind of set it aside because once I realized it was a bootleg, I was like, I'm not going to review it because I don't do that usually, if I can avoid it anyway, unless there's like a figure in a set that is a bootleg or I'm unaware. But the more I looked at it and the more I looked at the Nanmu Spinosaurus together, the more I started to question whether it was definitely a bootleg or if maybe it was something that was just influenced from the Nanmu Spinosaurus. So what we're going to do, rather than actually review the figure thoroughly, we're going to go ahead and jump to a closer look, but we're going to take a closer look at this and the Nanmu Spinosaurus, which is this one. We're actually just going to use the brown one because they are the same sculpt, just different color schemes. And we're going to kind of compare and contrast them, because if you look here at them straight away, you look at it and you're like, okay, they definitely have to be bootlegged from each other, or this one has to be bootlegged from the Nanmu one. But once you actually get close and really start to examine the figure, I'm not so sure anymore. So let's jump to that closer look and see if together we can figure this mystery out. So once we actually pull the figure up, we now have it out of its stand and everything. You can straight away see it's got an interesting look to it. And when it comes to the head sculpt, I think it's very safe to say that that is not bootlegged from the Nanmu Spinosaurus. Because if you bring up the Nanmu Spinosaurus and you look at the two head sculpts together, they're very different, way too different to be even remotely considered a bootleg. Obviously, they both sort of recreate the Jurassic Park 3 Spinosaurus, but the Nanmu version is far more accurate than what you see on the head sculpt of this newest version. But if we could try to find a good spot to kind of look at them, once we start to lead back into the neck, you can see obviously we've got these quills on this newest version. We don't have quills on the Nanmu version. You can also see that the skin texture here running along the back of the neck is very different than what we see on the Nanmu version, as is just generally the detailing moving down the course of the neck. You can see everything as far as the sculpt and detail looks very different than what we see on the Nanmu version. So it's safe to say, I think at this point, from here on up for sure is a different part of the dinosaur. Definitely no bootlegging there. But then once we come down into the body, this is where it starts to kind of get a little bit tricky, because you can see the positioning of the arms looks very similar. The only thing I can say looking at them, though, is even though, again, this is another one of those instances, another one of the reasons why I kind of feel like maybe, and I'm not saying definitively, maybe it's just influenced by the Nanmu Spinosaurus, because you can see the arms are positioned similarly, but different at the same time, because you can actually see, again, the muscle definition moving down the arm looks very different, and even the positioning of the arm itself looks a little different, with the way, if you look here in the joint of the elbow compared to here, and the way the arm leads out, it is positioned a little bit differently. Also, when you move down into the fingers, you can see the fingers are different as well. You can see the fingers are all kind of together on the Nanmu version, whereas they're spread apart and kind of, a little bit more interesting looking on this other version here. So the arms look similar, but a little different. Now, this is going to be a part where it's going to be pretty close to impossible, I think, to get them both in the screen at the same time. But if you look at the texturing of the skin here in the stomach region and what we have going on here, and including the skin wrinkles leading off of the stomach into the rear leg, and then you look at it from the Nanmu version, the skin texture is entirely different. There's a lot more detail, a lot crisper detail on the Nanmu version. So you can see, again, definitely a little bit of a different look as far as that goes. Also, you can see that there's a lot of osteoderms on this version, whereas the Nanmu version doesn't feature any of those osteoderms. There's also a scoot-like appearance moving along the sail there. You do have that on this version, but I kind of feel like they look a little bit different than what you see on the Nanmu version. Not too far off, but a little different. Also, leading up into the sail has, again, definitely had some work done to it. If it is, in fact, a bootleg, they very clearly altered some things, because we clearly have these weird quills and everything leading up and over the top. But if you look at the actual texturing to the skin of the sail, compared to what you have in the Nanmu version, it's pretty similar, but a little different. You know, it's hard. I don't know if we can get them both in here at the same time to sort of look at the two together there. I think it's the best we're going to get. You can see they definitely look similar, but a little bit different. Like you can see on the newer version here, the Quilled version, as you lead up toward the top of the sail, those spines that move up have a little bit of a widening effect as you get higher up, whereas you don't see that on the Nanmu version. So again, I'm a little bit confused as far as that goes. Also, when it comes to the thigh, you can see the thighs are very different. The muscle definition is a little bit more generic on this version compared to what you see on the Nanmu version. The thigh is also a lot thicker, and this one's a lot thinner, and the skin texture is entirely different from what you see there. You can see the knee, and you can also see, again, a very similar pose as you move down as far as the leg goes. And then once you reach down into the foot, you can see that the foot is also kind of positioned similarly, but this version has the foot a little bit different, I think, compared to the Nanmu version. It looks super similar, but the positioning of the toes, as well as the way that the foot leads up, looks a little different. You can see, actually, let me try to put this down so I can use my other hand. When you lead here from the curvatures in the toes and it leads up, there's just this little tiny bend before it actually leads up the course of the leg. But with the Nanmu version, as I drop that, you lead back the toes, and then you have this longer area leading up from the toes before we lead up the rest of the leg. So again, it's little differences like that that kind of have been making me wonder about this figure and whether it is in fact a bootleg or if it is just something inspired by. Also, as you lead down from the sail here on the Quilled version, you can see that the scoots look very interesting here. It kind of runs down with like a double row of scoots moving along the sail, and then leads out and turns into one row of scoots leading through the course of the rest of the tail. But this one has more like ridges running down the tail rather than scoots. The tails, though, are definitely similar as far as... let's see if I can get a position to show you this. But the tails are very similar as far as the pose goes. You can see they kind of bend in the same way. Sharper turn to the tip of the tail there on the Quilled version. It's also a good bit thicker than the Nanmu version. So there's definitely some difference there as well. And then when you look at the two here, you can again see we have the same style turn in the head kind of facing away from us. So they very much so have the same style pose and everything. You can see the texturing and the detailing of the skin is very different. Even the shape of the throat is different. The arm, as you lead down, you can see is kind of similar. But again, even the arm leading back comes at more of an angle, I think. Closer actually into the stomach, more so than, whoa, I'm going to drop it, more so than this one. You can see the arm kind of leads down, whereas this arm leads back. And the fingers, again, are a bit different as far as the pose goes and the skin texture and everything. Even the scoots running down the fingers are very different. You can also see, again, though, that we have the same sort of look here to the stomach where the elbow and the knee are kind of meeting right there, but the elbow seems a bit higher up in the thigh on the Nanmu version, whereas the elbow almost meets the knee on the Quilled version. Same type of look as what we've seen as far as the difference goes between the skin texture and the scoots and everything on the other side compared to this side. And then again, when it comes to the muscle definition, looks a lot more natural on the Nanmu version as you move down. But you can see again, as far as this one goes, it's way more defined in a not so natural way moving down. But again, we have the foot planted just like we have with the Nanmu version. The feet definitely look different though, but again, it's a little bit tough to tell. So I think that's really all we need to look at when it comes to the differences between the two. It's just so hard to really genuinely tell if this is in fact a bootleg or not. It's probably one of the biggest mysteries to me, because although I've seen figures in the past that are bootleg from each other and they look similar but a little different, you can find that one area that just matches up perfectly. And even though this has a very similar stance, very similar style to it, to the Nanmu version, I honestly can't find that one exact spot that looks like it absolutely is definitively a bootleg. So again, it's kind of a mystery to me. But then once you stop taking that closer look, you bring them here, you stand them next to each other, you can't dare deny how similar they look from a distance. Like, the pose is so similar. And this right here, like this visual of the two standing next to each other from a little bit further away, is what really throws me off about this figure again, and has me very unsure of it. So I figured this again would be a pretty fun video to make, and something that would be a little bit different from what we usually do here on the channel, and maybe something we can do moving into the future if we have figures that kind of resemble each other. Maybe we can try to decipher whether they are bootlegs or not together. Again, this one I'm just really unsure of. I don't really think we need to do measurements or size comparisons or anything like that, at the very least until we decipher whether this is in fact a bootleg. But the figure was so different and so unique with those quills, I really felt like it would have been fun to make this video to show it off to you guys, but at the same time kind of help me decide if it is in fact a bootleg, because it's honestly been killing me. I've been looking at this thing for about a month now, trying to decide, and I just figured it would be probably more fun to reach out to you guys and see if we could figure it out together. So, of course, we could take a look at a few different shots here of the figures together and see the similarities, but again, when you take that closer look, you can't help but notice that there's just so much different about it. And I feel like if it was going to be a bootleg, why would they go through the trouble of sculpting almost an entirely new figure anyway? Because like everything about this figure, fine detail wise, for the most part is different. So I really, personally, I feel like it's just very heavily influenced by the Nanmu version, because there's just so much different about it. Very slight differences, even like the positioning of the leg. Like the Nanmu version has its left leg leaning out a little bit further, whereas the leg of the Quilled version is kind of standing more straight up. So there's just really subtle little differences that make the figures look different but similar. So again, in the comments section, I want to hear your opinion. I need you guys to tell me what you think, if you think it is in fact a bootleg, or if I've at least shown off the differences enough to you guys that you can now look at it like me and think maybe it's not a bootleg. I really don't know. But again, I'm very interested in your opinions, so in the comments section, let me know what you guys think, and maybe we can come to an overall decision as to whether or not this is in fact a bootleg or not. And also, again, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.